Hello, my name is Jesus Aranda, and this is a presentation of the primary research results for my Market and Consumer Research Analysis class, the subject of which is MTC aerial imagery. Let's begin. MTC Aerial Imagery is a veteran-owned San Antonio aerial photography business founded in 2018 by Manuel Torres Cortez, who is the owner and operator and the only employee as of today. The business has established strong relationships with local government and local businesses and is a proud member of the San Antonio Chamber of Commerce, a organization for which the MTC Aerial Imagery Company has provided substantial service and developed strong relationships since inception. As of yet, there is no online presence for MTC Aerial Imagery, but they have a strong desire for a website and social media launch campaign. The purpose of this analysis is to set the table so that goal can be reached. For the introduction, I want to talk a little bit about the secondary and initial research, which helped inform my primary research, which we'll talk about soon. One of the things that I want to look at is the makeup of San Antonio's business clientele. The target market that MTC Aerial Imagery is going to be trying to reach is a very particular buyer persona, which can be seen in my paper. But to figure out if this was a good fit for MTC Aerial Imagery, I did a little bit of research on the demographics of the potential clients in the region. What I found was the city is very highly educated. Bureau of Labor and Statistics shows a lot of people in the region have college degrees. 67.9% have a college degree and 74.8% have a bachelor's or above. When you pair that with the fact that San Antonio is a rapidly growing city, lots of businesses being created here, lots of expansion, this sets the table for a very, very good opportunity for MTC Aerial Imagery to expand into areas that might not have been serviced previously, or actually cut off a big portion of the competition that's already in the region. Part of that is its identity as a veteran-owned business, because the San Antonio region is very veteran-friendly. There's lots of room for growth here. There's lots of ways for MTC to stand out and establish its brand as the most trusted veteran-owned aerial imagery company in the region. You can look at some of the data points we have here, but basically there's a huge area for growth here. And 82% of the customers in range are 39 through 49 are on social media, which means that our social media messaging campaign has very, very good opportunity to be a success. For the purposes of my primary research, we wanted to find the people who are key decision makers and possible clients who we can talk to directly, so we can get an idea of what they like, what they don't like, and how they achieve an understanding of their many contractor petitioners. So 10 local businesses within the commercial development or real estate and agricultural fields were identified by the client himself through his connections with the local community, and they were isolated, contacted through phone calls or email, and introductions from established relationships, and they were met in individual interviews so as to not have a sense of competition, altering their answers or having them keep secrets or not wanting to speak freely. So the traditional survey focus group area wasn't good for this particular round of interviews. The companies present represent significant members of their respective communities, and this is just a small portion of that to get us kind of a snapshot of how people feel and some of their attitudes, but we'll go on to that a little bit later. Now, the procedure: the 10 executives were solicited. Some of them were able to attend, some of them weren't. The ones who weren't had selected junior representatives to go in their place. They were interviewed on an individual basis, as I said. The location was in an area that's suited to meet their schedules and maximize their ability to participate. These were informal yet structured interviews, so the questions weren't too difficult or too intrusive to the point of putting people on the spot. People had to feel comfortable, and it also served as an opportunity of not just an interview for the purposes of the survey, but for also Manuel Torres Cortez to be able to establish a good relationship with these people here. So we avoided probative questions. We also wanted to make sure people were comfortable, so we didn't have digital recording devices, because in my experience, even if it's a harmless interview, people are really nervous about being recorded and they might not speak freely. So the questions were created in such a way as to record respondent demographics, beliefs, and outlook on the company procedures and other values. So sometimes when it's a junior representative, they might not be able to speak freely for what their executives would believe, but they were informed enough about the company beliefs and attitudes that they could answer the questions. So these were long form answers that were solicited, so it can feel more like a conversation, but the client, Manuel Torres Cortez, would key in on certain key words and record those. And if those words were stated enough by a number of people, they would be written down and they would be used as a data point so we can analyze it later. This was how we're able to get both qualitative and quantitative data. And there's a form that he used for each respondent that is seen on your screen right now. Now for the analysis, the demographic characteristics of the participants did not always entirely match the buyer persona. The buyer persona is age 40 to 50, white, married, 100, I believe it's 150 to 170K, San Antonio, children. That's not always the case here, because San Antonio is a very racially and ethnically and culturally diverse area. So we saw a little bit of variance from there. But typically the big decision makers did fall in line with our buyer persona outline. Now, the biggest deviation from that was the junior representatives, as I mentioned before. 3 of the 4 were 30 to 40 years old rather than 40 to 50, and a varying racial makeup. You can see some of the data points here. Data recorded by the client was sent to myself for processing and creation into an Excel worksheet product. Data arranged by qualitative and quantitative properties. I try to separate the yes, no's, important, non-important scale questions into quantitative, and qualitative were when we captured the significant keywords which we use for messaging. There were some outliers, but if that was only like one iteration of that keyword being used and there were about a dozen more of other ones, we would kind of ignore the outlier because it wouldn't change the makeup of the statistics. The results that we have were some good data for takeaways on messaging. For example, data sought to address weaknesses and vulnerabilities MTC faces. With our SWOT analysis, we determined that one of the considerations that people might have against MCC was the company size. So we asked some questions relating to that. Some of the questions were if a company could be considered too big, too small, and also some ethic questions like what beliefs and thoughts and perspectives would line up with the company that we're trying to do business with. Feedback shows a close split on if a company can be too small. The majority believe a company can be too big. Responsibility, trust, family-oriented are key attributes they see in their companies. Trust is a major quality for potential contractors. Responsibility and trust, the most important for a successful partnership with those pulled. And the key takeaway here is trust. Trust has been stated as a very, very important aspect in pretty much every question we've had. That's the word that came up the most during this entire analysis. Now, the size of the company kind of leans in our favor, but it's not as definitive as we might have hoped. The larger majority thinks a company can be too big and they might not be able to address their concerns, and they might not trust that company, but it doesn't seem like being too small is necessarily the worst thing in the world as far as the results go from this analysis. For the results on technology, part of our questions were geared specifically towards technology and technological development. Questions were geared towards finding participant sentiment towards current or potential technological services. So does MTC need to expand beyond just drone photography from the sky down to the ground? A majority strongly desire a company or a contractor that is able to boast about the best technology, the best services, the most state-of-the-art services. So that was a good one. Social media has also seemed very important in terms of messaging. Technological messaging the latest form of communication, so that's something that they like to see. Particularly lines up with our secondary research that we mentioned before. As far as expanded services go, the big ones were thermal imagery and aquatic imagery. Those are ones that are pretty big as far as geological surveying goes. The majority were not interested in either of them, though, so I think that MTC can rest comfortably that they're pretty much focusing on the most important aspects of those things as it is now. The thermal and aquatic are very nuanced and specialized, and there just aren't that many companies in the San Antonio region as of yet that need those particular services. So the key takeaway for messaging is social media messaging and innovation are something that we really may need to make sure we focus on in the future. In conclusion, the feedback that we got was great here. We learned a lot about what we need to do and how we need to do it. There are a couple of things that we can do with this information. Number one, taking the information from the client and discussing my outlook on how these things have turned out for them. I believe it's very positive towards the approach we've been taking thus far. We're not going to need to radically change anything. We live in, the company operates in an environment where there is substantial support for veteran-owned businesses, where trust is very important, and where being a small operation isn't necessarily held against you. So those are all great things, and we can use those in our messaging. So I can advise on additional actions on how we need to proceed from this and continue to refine messaging with the top keywords, those being trust, innovation, technology, social media, those types of things. And this is messaging that we can use for SEO targeting campaigns, email marketing campaigns, ads, media such as video, but more importantly, since the strength of MTC right now is person-to-person communication, handshake deals, make sure he drops those, he being Manuel Torres Cortez, drops those messages whenever he interacts with these people, making sure trust, family, those types of things are mentioned, because those are the things that people really key in on, and those are the things that can really make him stand out amongst his competitors. Next steps for primary research. An email survey for a non-targeted audience would be good. Just because they're not in the targeted audience doesn't mean there isn't a potential for other people to be brought in to the services. There could be an area which hasn't been catered to yet, such as maybe a big group photo for a wedding, marches, parades, those types of things. So those are the types of things that we can really get a wider perspective on if we start to talk to people outside of the buyer persona. We can develop follow-up survey for the target demo. Particularly what I would like to do is repeat this same analysis, the same survey with a different group of 10 to see if these results mirror what or these results match what the second group would, just to make sure that this isn't an outlier in and of itself. And if there were radically different answers, maybe do a third one. So those would kind of make sure that we have a tight shot group, make sure the results aren't too spread apart, and we can narrowly focus on what really matters. Focus group and test poll on video ads. video ads and video media are very, very important, along with still imagery for this business. So when it comes to those types of advertising products, you want to make sure that you test with people to make sure they like those types of things. What do they like to see in these ads? Those types of things will really, really go a long way. So all in all, this analysis of the primary research really shows that MTC is on target for messaging, and they're making sure that the results that we have show that everything that we've been doing, every method that we've had to identify the buyer persona, what they like, what they don't like, what they respond to, has been so far on target and worth considering expanding additional research into, to make sure that when the inevitable launch goes off, the launch for the social media, for the website, we really, really maximize effectiveness through ads, through everything else, so that we're really taking a chance to get a large slice of that competition out there. We're going to make sure we measure twice and cut once, and so far the primary research has shown that the efforts that we've made thus far has been on target, and will continue to remain on target unless something drastically changes. So I hope you've enjoyed the presentation. I really, really appreciate you taking the time to listen, and I hope you have a great day. Thank you. Bye.